Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Alexander, and I'm here with Jonah Smith and Lee Holman. Our recreation project consisted of cleaning up the forestry conclave area, which is a task that was long overdue. We chose this project because, as members of the forestry club, we wanted to give back to the club and make it an area that they can use for practice for conclave in the spring of 2021. Mr. Hall is our stakeholder, and he advised us of the tasks that needed to be done in order to complete this project. He wanted us to clear the overgrown brush, clean out rotten firewood from under the firewood shed, gather all old cants, poles, and burning logs to one area so that they could be easily removed. We also mentioned painting the cant stands with an anti-corrosive coating to keep them functional. One of the reasons this area was so thick is because in the spring of 2020, conclave was canceled due to COVID-19. Therefore, the area was never cleaned last year. The practice area was overgrown with privet, dog fennel, pokeweed, blackberry, and other invasive species. To combat this, we weed eated around stationary objects such as bleachers, cant stands, the firewood shed, and any other areas that were not accessible by the tractor.
So our first task was to walk through the entire area with flagging tape and flag all objects that would have been hazardous to the mower and can't be easily removed. While doing this, we found pieces of scrap metal, chunks of concrete, scrap wood, discarded light poles, and other various objects too large to be removed by hand. So after all these areas were flagged and marked, we then moved to clearing brush by hand around the stationary objects, such as the pile of cants, the cant stands. So we did this with weed eaters, and it took us about 3 hours per person, and we had to use some pretty fancy weed eater string that was made to handle this thick brush, but in some areas that was still inadequate. So when we came across this, we had to use bush axes and machetes, and this put us at about 4 hours of just hand clearing the brush so far. So once we finished clearing away from these non-removable objects, and then we were able to begin mowing with the tractor. So first, we had to reach out to Dan and Trey Davis, who's the AVAC farm manager, to get a time scheduled to rent the tractor and all our other tools that we needed. So once we got all our tools, we were able to finally cut back the overgrown brush, and so we just started running the tractor and mowing down what we could. But we got to a point where we were running into too much debris and we didn't have enough. It basically was inefficient to keep trying to mow around objects, so we finally just said we have to move them. So to do this, we had to lay the chain on the ground and attempt to roll the logs or whatever the object was over the chain, because we couldn't pick it up by hand. They were just too heavy, and we didn't have a front end loader on our tractor. So this was easily the most labor intensive part of the project, just going into the brush and trying to wrap the chain around these objects. But once we got that done, we chained them to the tractor and were able to pull them out into one consolidated area. And we found that some of the wood that we removed could still be used for future conclave practices or other forestry club events. And so instead of disposing all of it, we decided to leave this up to the discretion of future forestry club members, because it would have been wasteful just to trash it all when it can still be utilized.
For many years, there has been pallets and pecans stored under the shed, but is now rotten to the point where it's completely unusable. It was also overgrown with pokeweed, blackberry, smilax, dog fennel, and privet. All the rotten wood was compiled together to be burned at a future date. This allowed us room to remove all the overgrowth, clean up the area around the shed, and use it to store seasoned firewood. Next, we removed all non-salvageable pallets that will be burned at a forestry club social. This will ensure that no nails will be present to damage any equipment in the conclave area.
So we decided to include a few after pictures of our recreation project. What we're looking at here is the conclave area after it's been weed eated, bush axed, and mowed. Before we started, the brush was approximately 6 feet tall, rendering the area unusable. On the right-hand side of the screen are the consolidated debris, and on the left are the camp stands, firewood shed, and usable cans. At this point, we're essentially finished with the task, the last step being to come up with an herbicide prescription as recommended by a stakeholder. We took this second photo to show the scale of some of the logs that had to be moved by the tractor. You know, if we're just talking some of those burling logs, they're probably, the same diameter as a 16-inch tree. As you can see, they're all in one area and may need to be burned when the weather is conducive. We were told that there was an old wellhead in the area, but no such thing was found. With all logs gathered and no wellhead present, the area can be safely mowed from here on out.
We feel that preventive maintenance would be the best course of action for this area because it'll be way easier to mow when the brush is maybe 6 inches tall versus 6 feet tall. So if we can just keep up the good work and continue to mow and spray herbicide when needed, then this area will be eventually a lot more aesthetically pleasing and a lot more usable for whoever needs it. So.
Also in the future, herbicide treatments will be needed to eradicate undesired species. One thing that's a really big eyesore down there is, I would really like to get in touch with the AET club, see if they could remove some of their bleachers. Just since we mowed this, maybe 3 weeks ago, people have already brought in 3 new boats, a grill, and it just makes the area an eyesore. So if we could get rid of some of that, really give the students some initiative to look after the area, take pride in it, and just use it for what it's meant for. I think that'd be the best way to go about this as well.
So for our final recommendations, we recommend that next growing season, hopefully around March, April, May, before students are gone home for the summer, this area needs to be mowed, and if possible throughout the summer, mowed bi-monthly. And so after we have the initial herbicide spray and it starts to emerge again, and once we can begin mowing, this will encourage the grasses. And so once grasses are established instead of weeds and woody brush, then it'll be way easier to maintain. And so that's just one thing we need to be diligent about mowing it instead of letting it grow up and then mow it. It needs to be continually mowed. And as they pop up, even after our first herbicide treatment, we're expecting it'll probably take at least 2 or 3 treatments at different times of the year to really take a hit at some of the weeds that are currently there.
Having the Forestry Conclave practice area is a privilege to all forestry students. Therefore, I cannot stress enough how important it is for this area to be maintained and cared for. Doing this will ensure a sense of pride for current and future forestry students and forestry club members, and will let others know that this area is being used by students and faculty alike. Lastly, if this site is maintained and taken care of, it will discourage dumping of excess materials by other clubs. Thank you.